Well, I welcome you to our session on the integration of social sciences and humanities in the current research program and in particular in our future research program. Now, with our R&I days, we have entered into uncharted waters because we want to do a real co-creation. What sounds simple sometimes is very difficult. I think over the next 3 days we will have more than 4,000 visitors in the different sessions and also in the individual meetings to pick your brains and to get your input for the strategic planning of the first part of our new research program. To do this, we have based ourselves on the framework program Horizon Europe, and sorry, now I start with our Eurospeak. Normally one shouldn't do that, but I have no choice in this case. And on the specific program Horizon Europe. And in this specific program, it specifically mentioned that social sciences and humanities should be integrated in our research programs and projects throughout the entire program. What sounds easy is sometimes quite challenging. We have put our orientations paper up to an online consultation, which was opened in late June and which will still go on until 4th of October, if I'm not mistaken. And we will collect and feed the input we will get from our sessions into our strategic planning. Now, the strategic planning is to make the program happen, to implement it, and to see what are the priorities. We have, with the different commission services now, if I may put it, pondered a first draft, and we would like to put it at the test with you and to get your input. Now, where have we started from and what are the tendencies? And there I can already give you some of the feedback from the public consultation. I'm just watching the watch so that I don't speak too much because we want to listen to you and not to me. In Horizon 2020, we have the integration of social sciences and humanities. We monitor this. We do the flagging of the projects, which works out quite well, but we've also reached our limits. Why? Because we have identified where social sciences should be in, but in the end, where they should be in and if they are in, sometimes are two different things, and very often, although it's flagged and we deem it useful, in the end it does not turn out to be in. Of course, we can do legally binding measures, but we need to go a bit deeper. And the challenge now for the new program is not only that we say we want to have as much social sciences in as possible, but we need to look at it from a different angle. What is the added value of social sciences in a project? Very often we have beautiful technical solutions, but they end up in a drawer because nobody is interested and nobody uses it. This can change if we integrate the social sciences from the very beginning onwards, if we have a direct dialogue with the citizens, and if we really build this up from scratch. This is the challenge, and in the new program we go not for monitoring, but for societal impact of what we do, and we want to foster behavioral change. In order to do that, we have invited 3 expert speakers today. We will have 3 blocks with a few minutes of introduction, and I have asked my colleagues to be provocative so that you can react, and after each of these interventions we will ask the floor to get the feedback, and then we move on to the next colleagues. And to start with, I would like to invite Professor Jane Ollmeier from the Trinity College in Dublin. And she's also the chair of the Irish Research Council, and she's the coordinator of our SHAPE ID project. And Jane, if you could make your first statement so that we then can collect the reactions. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Harold. Ladies and gentlemen, it's lovely to be here this afternoon, and especially those of you who are joining us online. My brief was to take stock of current practices of SSH integration and interdisciplinarity at the national and EU level and identify good practice. So I have 5 minutes. I'm going to make 4, I hope, provocative observations that will get a discussion going. The first thing I'd like to say is, where is the arts? Even just now, Harold defaulted to social sciences. Where were the humanities? I think we need to throw SSH out and in its place put AHSS, the arts, humanities and social sciences. Let me tell you why I think the arts have got to be here. We do things for emotional, not rational reasons. Just look at the climate change discussion that Greta Thunberg has got moving. If we are serious about action and if we're serious about the missions, it's absolutely critical we engage our colleagues in the arts now, because what they will bring to the conversation is emotion, empathy, and issues around identity. The other thing I would say about the arts is that they're the early warning system in any society. So they're already ahead of any researcher in the humanities and social sciences. I'm going to give you a single example. I grew up in Belfast during the Troubles. You've all heard, I hope, of Seamus Heaney, the late Nobel laureate, the poet. Heaney wrote about the Troubles in a way that none of us were able to articulate the trauma we were experiencing. And that's why, for me, the value of the creative arts, the performing arts, the visual arts simply cannot be overstated. And again, I would ask us all to move from this SSH to AHSS, a new acronym for the Commission. The second thing I'd like to do is to reflect a little bit on the current practices of SSH or AHSS integration. And this is where I'm drawing on SHAPE ID, which is the program that I'm coordinating with colleagues from ETH, from Edinburgh, from Warsaw, Rome, and Jack Spappen. And the whole purpose of SHAPE ID is to put integration at the heart of conversations both across AHSS and also with other disciplines, especially STEM ones. So some of the observations I'm going to make now are very much drawn from the early work of the SHAPE ID project. And again, I'm very happy to talk about it at greater length during the Q&A. The first thing is obviously stating the obvious. AHSS is not a homogeneous entity. It embraces over 50 different disciplines, each with their own understanding of interdisciplinarity and integration. And that's the second point I want to make under this broad heading, is we have no real common understandings of nomenclature here. And it creates an awful lot of confusion. People conflate social sciences with humanities, and then, of course, the arts are just ignored. Nomenclature is contested, what we mean by integration, what we mean by interdisciplinarity. So I think we need to be very conscious of that. The other thing is the extent to which AHSS has actually been integrated under Horizon 2020. Here, I'd like to commend the work of Harold's unit and Christoph here in the Commission, where they published this report last year about SSH and the humanities in Horizon 2020. It makes for very somber reading, folks, because actually it only means economics and political science have been in any way integrated. Most of the humanities disciplines are not there, and the arts are there not at all. So when it comes to effective integration, it's a blank sheet of paper. And what we have at the moment is extremely tokenistic, and nobody wants to be taken for granted. And I think this is the challenge for us all. Rather than being the cherries on the top of the cake, we want to be the cake. We want to be there as equal partners with the other disciplines. You want me to finish? All right. The final point that I want to make is actually best practice. I do want to say a word. I've got lots on barriers, but I know Tobias and Nina will come back here. The final comment I want to make is about best practice, because part of what we're doing in Shape ID is looking at examples of best practice and trying to create best practice ourselves. We're having a series of learning case workshops where it's all about putting the arts, humanities, social science at the centre of missions, leading them or being co-PIs around the society, the SDGs, but also the environment, health, and obviously the missions are controversial at the moment because they really are not integrating effectively the HSS community. I also want to commend the work that my own funding council has done, the Irish Research Council. For about the past 5 years, they've had a series of calls all about interdisciplinarity, and they've insisted, and I have one more point to make, they've insisted that the arts humanities actually lead that with a STEM colleague. That has done a huge amount to give people confidence and competence in actually leading. So I'm going to close by suggesting that there are 4 magic ingredients that really make effective interdisciplinary integration. The first is time. I think we have to accept it takes time. It takes time to feel comfortable working across disciplines, building relationships, getting over the fact that we're pushing ourselves out of our comfort zones. So it's time, it's trust. Trust is so important, that we trust our colleagues and that there's genuine reciprocity amongst researchers. The third thing is scale. We have to think differently and we have to have real scale. And the final thing is funding. And on that funding note, Harold, could I make a suggestion to the Commission that the Commission does not fund a single mission or any project that actually espouses to have true integration unless there's meaningful engagement with the AHSS community. You do that, and that's a game changer. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jane. And you have more than taken to heart that we've asked you to be provocative. You've made several points. Let me just recall the role of the arts as they take a different angle in looking at things for finding solutions, and they're very underrepresented. So we need to find ways to get this in. Then the current practices, how does it work? How have you experienced this? And what can one make that the contribution of SSH is not the cherry on the cake, but is an essential part of it? Now, as we are in the listening mode, the floor is now yours. Please raise your hand and then you will get the microphone. Yes, please, over there.
It's really hard.
Oh. Sorry. Yeah. Thanks, Christoph.
Just in the line of Jane, maybe we should have a mission that is social science, humanities, and arts, and make compulsory of another discipline go with them. So the other way around.
Do you want to harvest some, or do you want me to respond to that?
We harvest a few ones, and then you can respond. This also gives you the time to reflect on your responses.
Sure.
Please, next.
Peter Olasko from the Slovenian Ministry. I think there is, of course, a small part of the first mission that could be very useful, and this part is called societal transformation. So the first climate change and societal transformation. And it wouldn't be there if some of the guys would not insist that this is a part of the name of the mission. And in that case, nothing from the SSH would be in the missions at all. And I'm still afraid that this part, societal transformation, could be seen just as a kind of, as a kind of effect of the climate change. So it should be kind of a subtitle to that. And I think that we should do our best that it's not like that. So it is a window of opportunity, this first mission. So societal transformation should be really understood in full power. And I think that it's not a problem for integration of SSH, but understanding, first of all, of SSH. And if we are looking at fact, actually no mission and no partnership is from the area of SSH. So this is clearly a sign how SSH is perceived in the European RNI community. And I think this is very wrong. I'm usually the one that at the Strategic Program Committee is always flagging the SSH, because I have the impression that it is not understood at all. So our mission, or let's say mission of SSH, including humanities and art, is not understood. So they forgot Plato, and they forgot Renaissance. And that's why I think, policymakers in the field of RNI should understand the role of SSH. And if you remember correctly, among the 10 JPIs, there is actually none from the SSH area. And my suggestion was, since we are facing this economical crisis or big crisis in some circles, in certain periods of time, we should have a kind of European partnership, or before JPI, on the trying to build a new macroeconomical model in Europe that would, of course, enhance also the social and cultural capital of Europe. We need it. The old Bismarck model is dead because of all these changes in last century. And we have to actually provide a new model. That's why also when discussing the era renewal, we are thinking about that, how to not only integrate SSH, but try to put the SSH in the, as you would say, the cream of the cake, probably. So the sweetest part of the cake. Because understanding is, of course, the first point we have to achieve. To understand the role and the responsibility with that, of course, of SSH. Thank you.
Here, please. There were two, and then you over there.
Robert Link, University of Graz. Sorry for my voice, but I experienced some problems with the evaluation of SSH-flagged projects. The fact that the project is flagged, a proposal is flagged with SSH, should oblige evaluators to assess this integration. Otherwise, it should be a very serious error which leads to a successful redress procedure. I have received evaluations from SSH-flagged projects. Nothing was said about the quality of SSH integration. And this should be changed in the future. It is a requirement, a must-have, and not a nice-to-have.
Pascal Liévaux, French Ministry of Culture. It's not a question, but an information. There is an SSH GPI Cultural Heritage. I'm chair of it.
Thanks for this clarification. I think there was over there and here, right? Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Nicholas Wallace. I'm a reporter at Science Business. obviously the Horizon Europe programme cuts across lots of different academic disciplines, pursues lots of different goals. Why does SSH in particular need to be integrated across these different sections? Isn't it just one field among many? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dipti Pandya. I'm from University College Dublin. And just before I say my remarks, I should say that I was the director of the Irish Research Council for Humanities and Social Sciences. So I am one of the converted, and I was a national delegate. So I've been around, but this story has been going since, I've been around since FP4. We're still sitting here saying the same thing. And I actually think I now work more with STEM, because my job is bringing in research income for our university. And most income, as you would all know, comes from the STEM area. And I see how they work, and I have seen how SSH researchers or AHSS researchers work, and I just see a very distinct difference between them. And I think we need to re-look at this problem. Even the panel you have here, and no offence to my esteemed colleagues who I know well, you know, we should have somebody from the STEM here, because how do we talk about integration? How do we talk about the solutions if we just keep talking to ourselves? And that's what we keep doing. We keep repeating the same issues. So from, you know, most of our colleagues in DG RTD are from an SSH background. So they do understand it. I know somebody said earlier that you don't understand. They do. But it's about changing the way we look at it. And I think bringing those STEM areas in to look at how they can integrate with us, as opposed to us looking at how we can integrate with them.
We take 3 more and then we move to the next block, because at the end we will have then a general discussion, and before that I would still like to provoke you a little bit.
Hello,
so we've got three more with this one, yeah?
Graham Kai, I'm the Vice President of ALEA, the Federation of European Academies of Science and Humanities. Thank you very much indeed, Shane, that was absolutely brilliant. And thank you for stressing arts and humanities. Can I also add a codicil to that, and that is language. I find that we're all speaking English at the moment, but I think I find that the vital importance in the humanities for different languages, variety of languages, and also this affects, if you like, migration or mobility, research mobility. My experience in ALEA is that there is sort of hemorrhaging of early career researchers from East Central Europe, Eastern Europe in particular, to the West. This has a lot to do with language differences. I think we should be much more open to the diversity of languages in Europe.
Agreed.
So 2 more.
Very quick. Gabi Lombardo, European Alliance of Social Sciences and Humanities. With the narrative of sustainable development goals, shouldn't we rather ask why the machine doesn't work to deliver rather than why SSH is not there? I don't think the question is placed in the right place. Thank you.
Marion Lezwig, Ministry of Science, French-speaking Belgium, and European Network for Research Evaluation in Social Science and Humanities. And I wonder if part of the problem, but potentially part of a solution, was not that we, SSH, in the broad meaning of the term, have a difficulty to produce a meaningful narrative beyond the different epistemology, a narrative towards the Commission, a narrative towards the public, who we are. If you compare to the STEM, it looks to me like more easy to communicate to the public who the STEM are, what they are doing with nice pictures of the cosmos or whatever. It's more complicated to have this appeal in the SSH. So how can we work to go beyond the epistemological difference, which are of course very important, but to have this common narrative and be more common and more powerful in our communication?
Okay. Thank you very much for this round. So we've already got a first round of input. And I would now like to invite our second speaker, Tobias Bardestrom. Tobias is one of the persons who has produced several of the SSH integration monitoring reports. You have also developed with my predecessor methodologies on how to tackle this, but you have also experienced the shortfalls of this approach. And during our working together, I've learned a lot from you on which we can now build. And I'd be very happy if you could share your experience with us.
Thank you very much, Harald. I will try to touch upon three main issues. That's co-design and flagging in the clusters in Horizon Europe, SSH in missions briefly, and then the status of interdisciplinarity in Europe. When it comes to the co-design, we should really have co-creation, and it's easier for me now to talk about that when I'm outside the Commission again.
What do you mean by that?
So input at the right moment, and not when 90% of the topic has already been prepared. And I see that both for the SSH unit, which is going to units across the Commission to try to improve topics, and also from the program committee and others who see almost finished text and then get to comment. Organizational aspects, the SSH people dealing with integration, have to be bilingual, SSH and STEM. So what the Commission asks of the applicants, that should be the case for yourselves. We need to have portfolio thinking of projects, meaning that the program committees have to talk more to each other to see the synergies and where the right people, projects, and the aspects of SSH can be. And also, it's impressive to see the input from the policy DGs in the inter-service consultations. But my advice is to focus as much as on that, on CSO, civil society, stakeholders, to get that feedback on the same level. Flagging, common ground for what deserves a flag is really important. You have to have a clear distinction between societal relevance, which also the technologists can, to a certain extent, work on, and the scientific requirement that the SSH researchers can provide. This is really important for the flagging, I think. 14.5 to 15 points without SSH under a flag topic. We have to move away from there. People are asking which purpose does that give, and what's that image proving from the Horizon Europe. Maybe you have to rethink the flagging exercise. Imagine health, 2 first years, 50 topics. You can have 10 flagged for SSH, 5 sustainable development, 5 gender, 5 international cooperation. The remaining 25 have no flags. In that way, only one cross-cutting issue gets extra attention on the top of the 3 main criteria. I have 7 arguments for less SSH flag topics in Horizon Europe. High quality topic texts, more concrete demand for SSH expertise, promoting SSH outside of cluster 2 is easier, attract the right SSH people, bring back those who have left because they see no point in joining, less direct competition with other CCIs, cross-cutting issues, identifying SSH evaluators makes it easier, higher acceptance to get SSH people on board on the panels, easier to monitor from the Commission qualitative SSH aspects, and respect the fact that SSH must not be everywhere. Having said that, of course, for the non-flag topics in Horizon Europe, you also have to encourage SSH and STEM cooperation, but it should not play such a big role in the evaluation. So that's just a recommendation. Trying to finish. Missions, early involvement on SSH on an equal footing, involve all disciplines. Arts has been mentioned, also educational research, design, see it broadly. Again, relevance versus actual involvement. Balance SSH plus STEM in the mission boards, but more importantly, in the administration that is backing the mission boards. So the board and the European Commission have to facilitate SSH involvement, but the SSH community really has to take their place and engage, even though those 5 missions now are not purely SSH, but there should be a lot of opportunities. Ultimate test for SSH plus STEM cooperation, evaluation. Add the criteria or change the weighting of the criteria. minimum one evaluator with SSH or interdisciplinary background, because the evaluation has to mirror the fact that missions are broader and have different objectives than normal research and innovation topics. All right, coming to an end. We have a long-term project and a common objective: increase the standing and recruitment of those who are specialized in between disciplines. That means critical thinking across disciplines, methods at an earlier stage, dialogue with schools, universities, governments, links with higher education, involve European stakeholders, and not least see out of Europe, identify and exploit practices from outside Europe. And now my last point, I also have a sheet with my recommendations, but that will come to a later stage. Change the rhetoric. Don't call it SSH integration. It has a negative connotation. It's more than a cross-cutting issue. And in the wider perspective, gender, international cooperation, sustainable development, SSH are so much more than an SSH, than a cross-cutting issue, sorry. They are enormous fields of their own.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tobias. And I think that brings us really to the core of what we need to think about in the future. On the one hand, you have made concrete proposals on what we should reflect upon, and I would invite the floor then to give their reactions on this. You've also mentioned the role of the program committees, and I've already seen, and two colleagues from program committees have already taken the floor. So how can we really get this information further? Please, what I also want to mention is that what we now do with the monitoring, the flagging, and the evaluation, we have come to a dead end with this. We can still slightly improve it, but we will not be able to make a quantum leap progress in that. So we will redo and start from scratch again with the new program and go much more on impact. This just as an element. Now, could I please ask the colleagues to take the floor on this part of our discussions, and that maybe we give first preference to the ones who have not yet taken the floor, and please be brief and succinct.
Thank you very much, Carlotta Besozzi from Civil Society Europe. I had a question about the involvement of civil society organization. You mentioned two things, co-designed, and you mentioned also equal footing, which for me are important. So I wanted to ask you particularly, as we are speaking of civil society organizations, how they can become, for you, much more involved in the process, from co-design to the monitoring, without being necessarily becoming professional of research, but really thinking of civil society organizations who work in other fields and who are active on the ground and can really then give input into societal challenges. Thank you.
Hi everyone, thank you very much. This is Rocío Castrillo from the Spanish Ministry of Science, Innovation and Universities. Thank you very much for the two presentations. And I have a couple of questions related to the also comments related to the SSH monitoring you have been doing all these years. I think it has been interesting up to now, because I think it's the moment to move forward, maybe with in-depth methodology. I don't know if you have thought about network analysis, the level of centrality of the SSH partners, because I'm feeling counting heads is okay for a first level of analysis, but I'm sure we can get very interesting information from something related to networks and the level of centrality of these SSH partners, because what I feel is sometimes SSH partners are around, maybe are not in the center of the design of the proposal. In this sense, also publications, I think I had the opportunity to talk to Nina about this, what information we can get from publications. For example, for the flagged projects, how many of them are SSH lead, how many of them are interdisciplinary publications. I think there is a lot of information we can get from here. Now we have the first 2014 results. I guess we have already deliverables. So there is plenty of information we can exploit here, and it's probably the time to do it. And I think many limitations have been mentioned by the first speaker, like there are 50 different disciplines when we talk about SSH plus arts. And when we talk about SSH integration, we have to admit we mainly talk about economics and political science, and this is important, and we have to be careful on what we give as information, just not to get anyone mistaken. And now I think it's my time to be provocative. I'm not a speaker, but I would love to. Because for me, flagging was a really good idea, first time I saw it. And I heard in the previous session about this hop-on format. It seems for those that are not familiar with this, it's extra money you can get in the middle of the project for the widening countries, as far as I understood. Why not to propose it for SSH researchers? The question here will be how far the Commission believes in the importance of SSH partners into a project. In this case, can be this hop-on instrument to be extended to SSH, understanding maybe original coordinators are not aware of what SSH researchers can give into a project, and it might be provoked later. I don't know. It will be something new we could explore here. Thank you.
Thank you. Two more, yeah.
Hi, my name is David Matthews. I'm a reporter at Times Higher Education. What would be your dream mission for social sciences, humanities and arts? I just really like to get a kind of tangible sense of what that would actually be, because you could really imagine it for the STEM fields, you know, transport, oceans, all these things that they propose already. But what would it be in your areas? So it'd be interesting to see what ideas you had.
I'd love to come back to
that. My name is Maria Lindholm. I'm from the Swedish Research Council. I have one comment is touches upon both the previous question and Tobias' presentation, which is on evaluation. I think it's a very important aspect, and I would just like to recommend the Commission to think very deeply into this, because on the consultation which is out now on implementation of Horizon Europe, there is one question on removing as much as possible in the evaluation criteria. So if there is a lot of support for that, I would imagine that SSH aspects could perhaps be removed. So you need to take that into account. And the other thing, I fully support what Tobias said about STEM and SSH balance in the mission administration. But I would like perhaps to expand that to the Commission more generally. I mean, if the topics are, if SSH aspects are introduced so late in the topic, the writing of the topics, we can't really expect the applicants to perform better. I mean, the Commission must integrate this more earlier in the process.
Okay, now before we move to Nina, just a few remarks. One of the major problems we had with our monitoring of SSH is that there was no formal obligation in the evaluation that SSH must be in, nor did we have an obligation to have SSH evaluators in the project, which of course made it difficult. But that is the reason why I would like to change this. I also react for a moment on a dream mission. We had discussed internally a mission on tackling inequalities through education. But we were not successful with getting it through, just as a remark. And I now move to Nina Braun. Nina, you are the coordinator of Net for Society for Challenge 6 for the national contact points. And by this, you have a grip and a deep knowledge of how people put together a project, what are the weak points, what are the points which can be easily changed, and what are the ones which are more difficult to change. Maybe you can give us your insights for our discussions here.
Yes, we also have the people on the phone that we have to advise on SSH integration. But first, what I wanted to say is, Jane, I totally agree with you that the arts have to be more visible, but we really should consider again the term that you mentioned. And I will continue talking about SSH integration, although I agree with you, Tobias, that the term is discussable. So for those of you who might be not familiar with what a national contact point is or does, national contact points are nominated on national level, and they are set up to guide applicants in their quest to secure EU funding. Net for Society already exists since 2008. We are now in our 5th funding round, and we have about 50 NCP countries in our network at the moment. Since the beginning of Horizon 2020, Net for Society supports various activities in supporting the SSH integration process. We organized conferences already in early 2013, and I think the policy, like Dipti said, she's saying the same thing since FP4. I think the policy recommendations might be still relevant. We also had a lot of expert meetings with the objective to find out good practices, and we are now at the phase that we are promoting those good practices. So that means we are practically going and teach our NCP colleagues how to advise on the issue, on how to advise well on SSH integration, and we are publishing an opportunities document where the SSH researchers can find SSH opportunities beyond the flagged topics. And we explain the impact and importance of SSH research through to the other disciplines. That means we are present as NCPs or as network, at their work program info days. We are trying to speak to the people. We are trying to say what does that mean, how to find partners. And I think this is one of the key issues. How do we find partners if we don't already have an existing network? Once during a workshop, how to successfully integrate SSH integration into technology-driven projects, a robotics engineer said that what helps him to see his research from a different angle or from a different side is actually the fact that his wife is a social scientist. And, well, I guess we cannot, we don't want to marry because the person that we marry is from another discipline. But what we definitely have to do is we have to exchange and we have to discuss all together. And that is a bit my main point. We need more spaces and we need more opportunities that bring together actors and that bring together different voices, including actors from outside academia. We really need to co-create and to co-design in order to be able to solve these multidisciplinary challenges or now even missions. Let me ask you, how many of you today in the room are from an SSH discipline? Please raise your hand.
I wanted to put this question in the general part, but that's fine. Sorry, yeah, me as well.
So and that's most of you. I saw that. I cannot see just until the end, but I guess that's most of you. And how many of you planned or to participate in a session that is not dedicated to their research area? So how many of you are going to go out of here and speak? So you see, that is what we need. We need to go out there and we need to discuss with the others on their disciplines, on their challenge, in order to get a common understanding of what we need. So now I would like you to maybe formulate a few policy recommendations. What, in practical terms, would you change in the strategic program, as you saw it now in the orientations, in order to really co-create and really change things together?
Thank you very much, Nina. Although you've taken my trump card for the last part of our discussions, I think you've really made provocative statements. So what would you like to change in our strategic program as it stands now? What for you are the most important elements there to make it work? And also what could be fora to bring together SSH and STEM on an equal footing so that they understand each other better? The floor is open.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm Monique Bossiam from the Italian National Council for Research, and in particular I'm from an interesting initiative that is trying to build a European research infrastructure for heritage science. And indeed, your last question, Nina, was very interesting to see how many in this room are planning to see other disciplines-related sessions. And I think this could also be something added to this discussion. So not only to integrate SSH or AHSS, sorry, I'm trying to learn, discipline into the STEM work programs, because this is something you can do legally binding, with flags, with evaluation scores, but this is always a little bit artificial. I mean, for my experience and my feeling. It would be interesting maybe to understand if STEM discipline have something to offer also to the SSH discipline, because this is what we're doing. We're bringing analytical facility into museums, into Institute of Restoration and Conservation. And most of the times, they're a little bit skeptical because they do not see immediately the advantage of cooperating with analytical facilities, synchrotron, neutron sources, laser scanners. So I think it is something to run the extra mile that should be considered. So also, let's say, a vice versa approach. So not only integrating SSH disciplines into STEM disciplines, but also to try to co-design the SSH work program with STEM scientists that maybe can offer solutions or techniques, or also an approach that can bring benefits to the SSH sciences. Maybe just this is what we do every day.
Thank you. 3 more?
Yep.
Yes, Alexander Husk, European University Association. I mean, when we speak about also, reaching out to the researcher to be active in this, when we speak about impact, there are actually 2 aspects which may fear, especially from the humanities, and I'm also personally come from humanities, is on one hand this short-term approach to impact being 5-7 years, while often in humanities it can take longer. And the second is this fear of, okay, it needs to be then measured, and especially from the humanities, this feeling measure means on one hand measuring a product or using research assessment approaches dealing with journal impact factor, H-index, and so on. And my experience was that there's often this fear of getting engaged more into these approaches. So when we speak more also what we can do, it's a question to what degree maybe open science and also a reflection on research assessment in this context can be also in the way how we deal with project and proposal can be useful also to more motivate and to send also more the message to the humanities, especially that what they are doing and their way they conceived impact can be is taken into account and it's relevant.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sarika Wilson from the Guild. My recommendation would be is to establish this co-creation or co-design between the thematic clusters of Horizon Europe since the beginning, because I've understood that the notion of impact is getting more and more important for Horizon Europe. So it's so important that the impact is formulated in a way that the societal impact is integrated into the text from early on. And besides the thematic clusters and the different units of DG RTD co-designing these work programs, it's also important to include scientists in the preparation of the texts, so to involve experts from different disciplines to feed into them.
One last one before we do the general round. For the general round, then, yeah.
Yeah, my name is Kirsten Hollander from Utrecht University, the Netherlands. I'm head of the research support for humanities faculty. And I was wondering, I mean, we have talked a lot about flagging and how to better achieve this, and that it's better to have a co-design instead of having flagging at the end when a topic is published. So that's, of course, I think, really the way to go to involve SSH in designing the topics, in developing the calls. But maybe it's also a good idea to be really bold and to say we will flag each and every topic, each and every call. And only then you have to argue why we'll remove an SSH flagging. Then the other disciplines have to argue why is it not relevant to have SSH or arts on board. So I would turn it around. That's my bold proposal.
Thank you very much. This is exactly what we are looking for. Now I would like to move on to a more general input. And we've heard now a lot of impact, also about the reticence of some SSH scientists not to be abused for marketing or elements like this. We fully understand this, but let's be realistic. As far as Pillar 2 of the current program is concerned, we have societal challenges and we need to tackle them. Therefore, we need to bring about change. And to bring about change, you can do this with one element, which is technology, and the other element is what I call the human factor. And only if the two work together, this can be done. Now, when Nina asked the question here in the group, how many people are experts or related to SSH, could I just make the counter check who is not an expert in SSH or related to organizations in SSH? Oh. Okay, I'm very grateful for the very few and bold ones who've dared to join in, but this is exactly one of our big problems. What do you think can we do in order to discuss SSH integration to get people on board who are not from SSH? Because if we now preach to the converted and tell you how important SSH is, I think that you all agree and nothing will happen. How can we tackle this? Because what we say is SSH is important and it needs to have its important place. Okay, what do we do? What do you do to convince the others that what we do in a project can really bring about change and has an added value? What do you do in your universities? How do you work together with the STEM sciences to produce joint projects? Because if it does not work in your universities at the level where you work, it will never work at the European level because people are simply not used to it. So I would be happy if I could have input on that. If I haven't offended anyone, not all of you, then my apologies. Please speak. Sorry, Christoph, I could have done.
Yes, the topic, I'm Peter van der Maas from Utrecht University. And I think we're talking about co-creation, integration social science, integration social science with the exact science, beta science. But I think it also has to do with the fact how universities are structured. It's traditionally by faculties. It will be a big step to build horizontal lines between faculties and create teams of researchers from several disciplines with a focus on societal topics. That's one part of the story. I think we do this the last 6 years in Utrecht, and it's very successful. And the other is that scientists should step out their academic circles and contact non-academic circles like businesses, like NGOs, like companies who are dealing with societal issues and work together and influence together, doing the research what society needs. That's my small remark.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so we've got 3 short ones, but please be very short, because we still need to get some short points from the panel before we close.
Okay, Maria Lindholm from the Swedish Research Council again. I just wanted to say that we, the Swedish NCPs within Societal Challenge 6, Transport and Energy, we will organize a workshop in Sweden in a couple of weeks from now, where we want to unite people who are interested in applying within transport and secure societies with SSH people and have them discuss what's the tricky part. Is it to find partners? Is it to formulate the research questions? Or what's the idea? This is kind of a test for us too, to see if that could be a good way of working with Swedish actors, but that could be, a source of inspiration perhaps.
Sounds very good, thank you. So 2 more.
Anyone? Yeah. I think I agree with what you're saying. I mean, we need to get these people together into sandpits or something like that, have them really collaborate on a proposal. It's not just people meeting one another, but actually forcing them together to write the proposals, I feel. To making the bold statements, I want to abolish a few words. I want to abolish the word integration, which means disappearing. I want to abolish SSH, which no one knows what it means. So it also includes, I'm sorry, AHH, whatever. I mean, no one in the world talks about QF. They also talk about quantum physics. Let's just call it arts, social sciences, humanities, whatever. And finally, I would like to promote a very separate, as an information scientist, I would say, humanities program, research program, into the cultural program. I think that's the only place that they will actually find a place. They will never, ever find a proper place into the framework program.
So I'm heading the Department of International Research Services at the University of Applied Sciences in Upper Austria. What we are doing is making first steps in bringing social sciences and economical science and economic sciences into technical development. So first we had kind of living lab, but then, so I have a PhD in philosophy and I have done some social scientific research for the past 20 years. And then I said, okay, yes, but we could do better than that. Because how do you select the participants? How do you know how to organize such a lab? So this is not something you can do according to a run-of-the-mill concept. So we have some social scientists at our University of Applied Sciences. Let's talk to them. So I brought them into a dialogue, and I'm thankful to Horizon Europe now, because I use this as a lever. Because I say, dear developers, you have to think about involving social scientists, because this will become very important in Horizon Europe. And that opens some doors. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. So I think now at the end of our discussions, we've also got some concrete proposals, and what I could imagine now, apart from our strategic planning, but to have some meetings with people who have already at their level experienced the working together, social sciences and STEM at their universities, that we can see what works, what does not work, in order to draw conclusions also for our program. Now, before concluding our meeting, I would invite our three speakers just to say 2-3 sentences maximum as a reaction. Could I start with you, Tobias? Sorry, I took you by surprise.
One thing that I didn't mention is the setup of DG Research and Innovation to be quite, let's say, on internal matters. I think it really looks promising, but it also means that all levels in the Commission has to be engaged and measured on their efforts on finding the right SSH experts and integrating SSH in their programs. Now I'm talking about the Planet, the Directorate, and all those other fancy new names in the new organigram. CSOs, no civil society organizations was mentioned. I think that maybe the best avenue would be in some kind of European expert advisory group, and I really hope some kind of configuration of that sort will survive now in the next framework program. Doing monitoring differently, I totally agree. And there, I think, unless the staffing in RTD gets much, much bigger, we should exploit more cooperation with European Research Area, Net for Society, ISH, and all those friends we have in the SSH field. And I mentioned ERA. They are looking to find themselves, revitalize the European Research Area. SSH can really get a place there.
Good, thank you. Nina.
I wanted to say something else, but I'm going to make it very short, because we have researchers from other disciplines out there, and we should definitely get out of this room and start discussing. And I think we should find, I think this is the first time that there is going to be a research and innovate there, the research and innovation days, and maybe next time we can have another setting. So we can have bigger discussions and we can really discuss on big topics all together in mixed up disciplines. So that would be my statement.
And I would agree completely. A lot of the discussion I'd agree with. I want to make 3 points. One is the literature review. Our colleague from the Spanish Ministry, Shape ID, is currently doing that, a full literature review, and we obviously will be sharing that very widely. If you haven't read Catherine Lyle's book, do. Being an Interdisciplinary Academic, How Institutions Shape University Careers, because I think it cuts to the chase of a lot of the conversations we've been having. And there are people out there like Catherine Lyle, Julie Klein, very, very wise heads that can really, I think, advise us. I want to go back to the DREAM mission. Our colleague from the THS answered, because unlike Alice, I actually believe that the arts, humanities, social science community has a huge amount to offer across the disciplines, whatever we call it. However, if there was a dream mission, one would be in that cultural heritage space. The other for me would be in the crisis of democracy space, which is one of the most interdisciplinary spaces there, because you can't talk about it without talking about climate, technology. But above all, I would do what Harold said. It's about putting the human at the centre of a technologically driven world. That's what the arts and humanities is all about.
Thank you very much for these closing words. Many thanks to our speakers for their contributions and for having provoked the feedback from our audience. I thank you very much for all your input. Please, the open consultation is still open. You're very much welcome to feed into it your contributions, and also at our village we have a cluster 2 booth, and we welcome you to have an exchange with us, to share with us your views for the strategic planning. Very many thanks.